Welcome back to another true horror story. Today I've picked out 3 stories for you, all sent in by viewers through email. So let's not waste any time. Let's jump straight into our first story. Story 1. The Uncle Who Made a Deal. Our first story was sent in by a viewer named Brian. I remember Brian actually sent us a story before, but this one is completely different. And this time, it happened to his uncle. Brian's father came from a big family, 5 brothers and 3 sisters. Out of Brian's 5 uncles, 4 of them lived completely normal, healthy lives. But the 3rd uncle, his name was Bernard, never got to live a normal life. And this story is entirely about him. To describe Uncle Bernard, you'd have to call him hot-tempered. He never listened to his parents, Brian's grandparents, no matter what they said. His relationship with them was already rocky. He'd be out of the house all day, never doing any real work, just wandering the town. Eventually his parents got so fed up that they sent him abroad to England to work. Back then, he was already a fairly well-known face around town. Everyone recognized him because he was always out and about. Not long after he moved to England, he started a relationship with a local woman there, and eventually, he married her. A few months after the wedding, Bernard left his new wife behind and came back home alone. And that's really where the story begins. Once he was back, a young woman from a nearby house, a distant relative of the family who lived close by, started noticing him. It's worth mentioning here, Bernard was genuinely handsome, not average-looking at all. Tall, full head of hair, striking. In short, he stood out. This young woman fell for him after just one look and confessed her feelings. But Bernard turned her down at first. He told her, "I already have a wife back in England. I can't do this." Sometime later, Bernard actually started making arrangements to bring his wife back from England. But then, out of nowhere, he suddenly refused. He wouldn't bring her home anymore, and right when the entire family said, "Fine, bring her over, we're all on board, everything's settled," that's when he cut off all contact with his wife overseas and told the family he wasn't bringing her back at all. Brian's grandparents tried everything to talk sense into him. "You already married her. She's a good woman. She's lovely. Bring your wife home." But nothing changed his mind. And then, without telling anyone, completely out of the blue, he married that young neighbor woman, the one who'd confessed her feelings, and brought her straight into the house. When Brian's grandfather found out, he was furious, because he actually knew things about that family, and it wasn't a good reputation. There were rumors about them around town. What exactly those rumors were, I don't know, but there was talk. One thing that kept coming up, though, was that the family had ties to dark occult practices, and the grandfather couldn't help but wonder if that was what had gotten its hooks into his son. After the wedding, once the new wife moved in, Bernard's temper got even worse. He couldn't stand being around his parents at all anymore. The relationship was already bad, but now he crossed a line, cursing at them, disrespecting them outright. A few months later, Bernard's wife gave birth to a daughter, but after the baby was born, Bernard's new wife started pulling away from the house, visiting less and less, keeping her distance. And around this same time, Bernard started slowly losing his mind. He began acting bizarre, saying things no sane person would ever say. At times he'd claim to be a prophet. Strange, disturbing behavior like that. Eventually the grandfather and the rest of the family took him to see a local healer. This was a long time ago, when traditional healers were trusted more than doctors. The stress of it all took a toll on the grandfather too. He grew seriously ill. He was already deeply unhappy with his son, first for secretly marrying into a family they didn't approve of, and now for this erratic behavior on top of it. Before he died, The grandfather placed a curse on his own son. What the curse actually was, I don't know, but he cursed him. After the grandfather passed away, one of Bernard's brothers brought in a much more powerful healer to try to fix him. This healer arrived at the house and carved a large marking into the ground. I'm not sure exactly where, since that detail wasn't included in the story, but somewhere on the property, a big marking was cut into the earth. Bernard was laid flat inside it. Brian was just a young kid at the time, so he was sent out of the room, but he and his cousins watched everything happen through the window from outside. Inside, it was just Brian's grandmother, his father, and his eldest uncle. The healer had them all sit together on a bed and sealed it off somehow. Then he drew another circle on the ground, sat inside it, and called on 4 spirit helpers to appear. He announced that 4 spirits were about to enter the space. The healer ordered these spirits to pin down Bernard's arms and legs. Then he summoned whatever was possessing him. The moment it appeared, Bernard started cursing everyone in the room, his own brother included, in the filthiest, most vile language imaginable. The healer began striking him hard with a whip-like rod, demanding, "Where did you come from? Why are you here? What do you want?" And then, in a deep, heavy voice that clearly wasn't Bernard's own, an answer came out. "We were sent here. We didn't come on our own. We were sent, and it was his own wife who sent us." According to the entity, Bernard's new wife, after he'd once rejected her, had gone through another spirit to collect strands of his hair and clippings of his nails, and used them to bind him through dark magic, controlling him completely. In exchange for marrying her, she'd made a pact with these entities. She'd sacrificed 3 roosters and 2 young goats to them. But there were more terms to that pact she still hadn't fulfilled. And that unfinished bargain was the real root of everything happening to him. The healer commanded the entity to leave the body. He threatened it, pushed hard, but the spirits said they'd merged with him too deeply, bonded into his very blood. His whole body belonged to them now, and there was no way to pull them out. The healer kept going with the ritual anyway, but as he did, blood started pouring from Bernard's nose, eyes, and mouth, his face twisting horribly. Seeing how bad things had gotten, the healer realized that continuing could actually kill him. He turned to the 2 helper spirits, the ones considered benevolent, and asked what to do. They told him plainly, the entities possessing Bernard were far too strong, too deeply fused into his blood. Removing them now would either kill him outright or leave him paralyzed for life. Faced with that, the healer didn't know what else to do. He spoke with the grandmother, and together they decided, for however long Bernard had left, the family would simply watch over him. But this risk wasn't one worth taking. The healer recited some final prayers, performed a small closing ritual, blew a breath over him, and left. The family built Bernard his own separate room, where he began living entirely alone. Sometime later, that extra room next to his got rented out to a working man who needed a place to stay. He paid rent, and it helped cover Bernard's living expenses since Bernard couldn't work and his wife was long gone. But not long after moving in, this tenant started having terrifying experiences at night. He went to Brian's grandmother and told her someone was touching him in the dark, grabbing his legs and pulling. The grandmother brushed it off. "It's nothing. It'll pass." She never told him the real story, what had actually happened to Bernard, or why. So the man kept living there, uneasy but staying. Then one day, he came running to her, shaking. The night before, he said, something had grabbed his legs and lifted him straight up into the air. After that complaint, the grandmother finally told him everything. He was furious. "Why didn't you tell me this from the start? Why would you let me stay here without warning me? He left the property shortly after and never came back. As for Bernard, his condition never improved. To this day he lives alone, somewhere between sane and lost, still not fully himself. That's how his life continues. That was our first story. Now let's move on to our second. Story 2. The Girl Who Sang Under the Old Oak Tree. Our second story comes from a viewer named Megan. Megan is currently in the 8th grade, and this is something that happened to her personally. Let's get into it. This story isn't from too long ago. It happened back in 2022. Ever since she was little, Megan had one big passion: music. She loved learning to sing, loved performing. One day, because of her father's job, the family had to relocate to a new house. She didn't mention the exact town, just that it was a new place. The house was a 5-story building, and their apartment was on the top floor. Right next to the building, growing up against the wall, was a huge old oak tree, its branches spreading out wide like an umbrella over the yard below. Almost every night after finishing her homework, around 9 or 10, Megan would grab her guitar and head up to the rooftop. She'd sit near where the oak tree's branches reached over the edge and practice singing there. Singing inside the apartment usually annoyed the rest of the family, so she preferred going up alone to the roof, a little ways off from everyone. One night, while she was practicing, Megan suddenly felt like someone had just rushed past in front of her, really fast. She didn't think much of it, figured it was just her imagination, and kept singing. A little while later, she got the strange feeling that someone was sitting right next to her, but every time she glanced over, nobody was there. Still, the feeling stayed with her, this sense that someone was sitting close by, just out of sight. A small wave of fear started creeping in, and she headed back down to her room. Once inside, she went to freshen up in the bathroom. When she looked into the mirror, she saw a horrifying, grotesque creature staring back at her, its eyes glowing a deep, blazing red. The moment she saw it, the terror hit so hard she couldn't even scream. She blacked out instantly. It was already late at night, and everyone in the house was asleep, so no one heard anything. She lay there on the bathroom floor until the next morning. Nobody knew. When her mother came to wake her up, she found her collapsed in the bathroom, her eyes an alarming shade of red, running a severe fever. Her mother rushed to get her father, and they took her straight to the hospital. She regained consciousness shortly after arriving, but she still couldn't speak. Once she was stable, they brought her back home, but on the drive back, she started vomiting, and there was a small amount of blood mixed in. That's when her father grew genuinely suspicious. The very next day, he brought her to see a spiritual healer. Not exactly a traditional shaman, more of a spiritual guide. The moment the healer saw her, he said, "Something supernatural has fixed its attention on your daughter. I need to look into this more closely." He sat Megan on the floor, lit some candle-like lights around her, and began reciting sacred verses. What actually happened to Megan during that process, she doesn't know herself. She can't recall any of it. That entire stretch of time is a complete blank in her memory. Afterward, she learned the details from her mother. The healer explained that a spirit had attached itself to her body, one that had, in its own way, fallen in love with her. It wanted to claim her completely, to pull her into its own world. It was a powerful spirit, but the healer insisted it meant her no real harm, a comparatively benevolent one, as these things go. He'd spent a long time trying to reason with it, convince it to release its hold and its fixation on her. But the spirit kept insisting, "I won't hurt her. I love her, but I want her completely for myself. I'll never let her belong to anyone else." That's the story Megan's mother eventually told her. Finally, After some time, the healer came back and tied a protective charm around Megan's wrist. He told her, as long as she wore it, no spirit could ever take hold of her. No matter how close it got, it wouldn't have access to her body anymore. And he told them to move out of that house as soon as possible, and to never, under any circumstances, remove the charm from her wrist. Not long after, the family really did move out of that house. Even now, Megan occasionally gets the feeling that someone's nearby, but nothing severe, nothing like that night ever again. She's living a completely normal life these days. That was our second story, sent in by Megan. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. And now, let's move on to our third and final story. Story 3. The Thing Under the Bed. Our third story comes from a small town, sent in by a viewer named Ashley. Ashley is in the 10th grade, and this story happened to her close friend, a girl named Tess. It's a recent story from this past January. Tess's mother had to undergo surgery and was admitted to the hospital for about a month. Every day, Tess would go visit her. One evening, she headed to the hospital to see her mom. Normally, Tess was always modest and covered when she went out, but that night, for whatever reason, she left with her hair down, no head covering at all. After visiting her mother, she headed home. On the way back, she had to pass under a large old tamarind tree along the road. She stopped at a small shop nearby and bought a pastry to eat. While she was eating it, she felt something like a gust of wind pass right over her. She brushed it off without a second thought and continued home. Since her mother was still in the hospital, it was just Tess and her father at home. That night, her father stayed up later than usual watching TV in the living room, while Tess sat on her phone. Suddenly, right between her face and the phone screen, something reached in and touched her. The room had almost no light except the phone screen, so she couldn't make out what it was. She let out a terrified scream. Her father came running and had to calm her down and get her back to sleep. But the next morning, her father woke up to find the entire house covered in claw marks, even the refrigerator. It looked like something enormously strong and sharp-nailed had torn through the place. Scratches on the walls, scratches on the fridge, marks everywhere. The day after that, coming home from school and sitting down to eat, Tess looked toward the balcony and saw a figure, 6 or 7 feet tall, standing completely upside down, feet pointed up, head hanging down toward the floor, dressed in white, with long hair hanging down as well, as if the whole body had been flipped and was resting against the ceiling. Tess knew for a fact that only her father should be home at that hour. Terrified, she ran straight to him. That same night, she felt something trying to touch her inappropriately while she slept. This kept happening for 2 or 3 nights in a row. Tess went to the hospital and told her mother everything. Her mother told her to start praying regularly, to read scripture every night, and to recite protective verses before bed. Tess followed her mother's advice exactly, and for 4 or 5 days, everything went quiet. Then her mother was finally released from the hospital and came home. That very night, Tess was sitting on her bedroom floor, eating dinner, scrolling on her phone, while her parents watched TV in the living room. She was sitting right in front of her bed. Suddenly, out from underneath the bed, something horrifying rose up, grinning at her, waving her over with its hand. She dropped her plate instantly and bolted out of the house. She was so terrified, she didn't even want to go near the front of the house. Her father managed to calm her down enough to get through the night, but Tess refused to go back inside. She spent the entire night outside. Seeing how bad things had gotten, her father brought in a local spiritual healer from the area the very next day. The healer took one look at her and said that because of her uncovered hair that night, a particular spirit had fixed its attention on her. a malicious entity known for tormenting people, terrorizing them, keeping them in constant fear and distress. That was its nature. He gave her a ritual to follow for 41 days straight, and he also gave her a protective amulet to wear around her neck like a pendant. She followed his instructions exactly for the full 41 days. And after completing it, she was finally free of it completely. To this day, she hasn't had a single problem since. Everything is back to normal. That's our third story, sent in by Ashley from her friend Tessa's experience.